The world was silent. For centuries, the ice had entombed it, smothering metal and flesh alike in layers of frozen time. The howling winds of the wasteland had long since buried its presence beneath forgotten storms. No one had come looking. No one had cared. Until now. Inside the Titan's cockpit, Commander Doran Voss awoke with a ragged gasp, his lungs burning as he sucked in stale air. His body convulsed, muscles locked in the stiffness of deep cryosleep. Frost rimed the edges of his control panel, the lights flickering erratically. The Titan's systems were weak, dying, but operational. That meant something had triggered them. Doran tried to move, but his limbs felt like stone. The cryo-rig disengaged with a harsh hiss, releasing the locks that had held him in artificial slumber for centuries. He collapsed forward, barely catching himself against the console. His vision swam, his mind fogged with disorientation. "Status report," he croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. A moment of silence. Then, a dim, familiar voice crackled through the speakers. "System integrity at 12%. Power reserves critically low. Warning. Multiple unauthorized entities detected within proximity." Doran's pulse spiked. Unauthorized entities. He forced himself upright, fingers sluggishly flying over the control panel. The Titan's external sensors struggled to reactivate, static rippling through the screens. Then, a grainy image came into focus. Outside, the ice shifted. Dark figures moved in the storm. They weren't human. Doran's breath came slower, controlled, as instincts long buried beneath time and memory surged back to life. He had gone into cryosleep on Svalbard, a remote Terran military world, after the Dominion had fallen. The Cell-Carry had purged humanity from the Galactic stage centuries ago. If something was moving out there now, it could only mean one thing. They had found him. The cockpit's emergency alarm pulsed a warning. Proximity alert. Hostiles inbound. Doran gritted his teeth and reached for the neural uplink. If he wanted to survive, he had to wake the Titan. In orbit above Svalbard, the Cell-Carry fleet hung like a shadow over the frozen world, its ships sleek and jagged, the color of burned bone. At its helm stood Vereshka, the Reaver Lord, his mandibles clicking in amusement as he gazed at the holoscreen before him. The rumors had been true. Buried beneath the ice, a Terran Titan still remained, one of the last of its kind. "Prepare the ground forces," Vereshka commanded, his voice a guttural rasp. "I want it stripped for its core, or destroyed where it stands." Beside him, his second-in-command, Zurich, tilted his head. "If it still functions, it could be of use." Veresh let out a low, chittering laugh. "You think like a scavenger. I think like an executioner. The humans lost their war. They will never rise again." His clawed fingers hovered over the ship's main console. With a slow, deliberate motion, he pressed the command. Below, the storm darkened. Drop pods hurtled toward the ice. The hunt had begun. Titan cockpit, ground level. Doran heard the impact before he saw them. The sky split open. Streaks of fire descending as Cell-Carry drop pods slammed into the wasteland, shaking the ground with violent force. Cracks splintered through the ice, fractures racing toward the Titan's frozen body. The cockpit lights flickered. Systems struggled to boot up. Doran slammed his fist against the panel. "Wake up, damn you." For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, a deep mechanical groan rumbled through the battlefield. The ice shuddered. The ground beneath the Titan cracked apart. Inside the cockpit, Doran felt it. The Titan breathing back to life. Outside, the Cell-Carry warriors, insectoid and armored, rushed forward, expecting to tear into a dead war machine. But Goliath-01 was no corpse. The Titan's eyes ignited, blazing blue against the storm. It had awoken, and it was angry. The cockpit trembled around Commander Doran Voss as Goliath-01 came back to life. The Titan's reactor groaned, its massive frame struggling against the centuries of ice and decay that had tried to entomb it. Systems flickered, emergency protocols failing to fully reboot. Doran didn't have time to wait. Outside, the cell-carry drop pods split open with a metallic hiss, releasing insectoid warriors onto the ice. They moved with terrifying precision, their chitinous armor gleaming under the planet's dim sun. Their elongated limbs carried them swiftly across the battlefield, plasma rifles humming as they surrounded the Titan. Their leader, a towering cell-carry warbringer, raised a jagged energy spear and let out a sharp, shrieking command. "Rip it apart." The swarm descended. Doran gritted his teeth. Not today. His hands flew over the controls, overriding safeties, forcing power into failing subsystems. Goliath-01's targeting array flickered online, marking 16 hostiles in close range, more approaching from the cliffs. The cell-carry thought they were facing a relic. They were wrong. With a violent wire, Goliath-01's right arm cannon powered up. Energy surged through its frame, crackling along rusted plating as servos and actuators groaned back to life. The Titan's colossal fingers clenched into a fist. And then the world erupted. A plasma blast tore through the nearest squad, disintegrating them in a flash of molten blue. Ice shattered beneath the Titan's weight as it took its first massive step forward, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The cell-carry scrambled, their momentary hesitation costing them dearly. Another roaring discharge from Goliath-01's arm cannon obliterated the warbringer leading the charge, sending its severed limbs skidding across the ice. Doran bared his teeth in a grim smile. "Still think I'm scrap, you alien bastards." But even as he struck them down, more drop pods fell from the sky. Dozens became hundreds. Doran's heart pounded as his radar flooded red with enemy signatures. This wasn't a scouting party. This was an extermination force. And above them all, looming in the distant sky, the cell-carry flagship hovered like a watching god. Aboard the cell-carry flagship, Vereshke stood on the command deck, arms folded as he observed the battlefield through the ship's projection screens. Below, his forces swarmed the last Titan, their numbers growing with every passing minute. The human was resisting. Veresh let out a soft, chittering chuckle. "Admirable," he murmured, clicking his mandibles. But futile. The cell-carry had eradicated humanity's once mighty fleets, crushed their armies, burned their homeworld. A single Titan would not change the inevitable. "Deploy the Reapers," he ordered, his voice carrying across the bridge. Zurich, his second in command, hesitated. "Reapers? My lord," they err. "Perfect for this." Vereshke's gaze darkened. "The Titan may be strong, but let us see how it fares against monsters built to kill Titans." Zurich inclined his head and relayed the command. Moments later, the cargo bays of the flagship opened, and the Reapers descended. The hunt begins. Doran had just finished ripping the cell-carry warrior in half with Goliath-01's hydraulic claw when his proximity alarm screamed. He turned, too late. Something huge and fast crashed into the Titan's side. Goliath-01 skidded across the ice, metal grinding against stone as it barely managed to keep from toppling. Doran's head slammed against his seat, his vision momentarily blacking out from the impact. When his sight returned, he saw it. Standing before him was something new, something different from the standard cell-carry warriors. It was a Reaper. Twisted and unnatural, the warform stood as tall as the Titan itself, a grotesque fusion of cell-carry biomass and stolen Titan technology. Its elongated limbs ended in serrated claws, its central torso bristling with energy conduits that pulsed with raw plasma. Its glowing green eyes locked onto Goliath-01, and it let out a sound that was neither a growl nor a scream, but something in between. Doran's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a war machine. It was a Titan killer. Before he could react, the Reaper lunged. Metal met flesh as Goliath-01 barely raised its arm in time, the impact shaking the cockpit. Claws raked against the Titan's armor, carving deep gashes into the plating. Doran retaliated with a devastating punch to its torso, sending the creature skidding backward. But it was fast. Too fast. The Reaper recovered instantly and vaulted onto Goliath-01's shoulders, its claws digging into the Titan's backplating. Warning alarms blared. The creature was trying to rip its way into the cockpit. Doran gritted his teeth, fighting for control. Then, over the open comms, a voice crackled through the static. "If anyone's hearing this, this is Captain Leora Kane of the Terran Resistance." Doran's heart nearly stopped. The Resistance was alive. "This distress signal is coming from a Titan, isn't it?" Leora's voice was urgent, battle-hardened. "Listen, whoever you are, hold the line. We're coming for you." Doran exhaled sharply. For the first time in centuries, he wasn't alone. But the battle was far from over. The Reaper screeched and drove its claws straight toward the cockpit. Doran had seconds to react, and he wasn't about to waste them. The Reaper's claws tore through Goliath-01's shoulder plating, sparks and metal shards flying as Doran wrenched the Titan sideways, trying to throw the monstrous warform off. Alarms shrieked in the cockpit, structural integrity failing, systems barely holding together. But he didn't have time to worry about that. The Reaper was still coming. It lunged again, this time aiming straight for the cockpit. Doran slammed both controls forward, activating the Titan's emergency thrusters. A blast of superheated air erupted from Goliath-01's back vents, sending the Reaper hurtling off his frame and crashing into the ice. Doran wasted no time. He switched to close-quarters combat protocols, one of the few systems still fully operational. The Titan's servo-assisted fists clenched, actuators locking into position. He turned, took aim, and swung. The punch connected with a seismic boom, Goliath-01's armored fist collapsing the Reaper's chest cavity inward. Biomechanical fluid and pulsing alien tissue ruptured on impact, the creature shrieking as it was sent sprawling across the battlefield. Doran exhaled. Not dead, but staggered. More were coming. His radar pinged, 2 more Reapers closing in fast. In the distance, the cell-carry forces were regrouping, adapting, surrounding him like a pack of wolves. They knew now. The last Titan wasn't just waking up. It was fighting back. Doran had seconds to decide. He couldn't win this fight. Not alone. Not here. He needed a plan. Then the voice from before crackled over his comms again. "Titan pilot, do you copy?" Doran's throat tightened. Captain Leora Kane. Terran Resistance. She was real. The signal hadn't been a hallucination. "Yeah," he said, voice hoarse. "Copy. But I'm in deep shit down here." No kidding. There was gunfire on her end, the sounds of ship engines roaring. "Listen, I don't know who you are, but we're bringing the cavalry. We picked up your distress beacon. Hold your position. We'll get to you." Doran's mind raced. They were coming for him. But would they make it in time? His eyes flicked to the Titan's failing power reserves. No way to keep fighting head-on. He needed to move. He remembered something. An old Terran outpost. It wasn't far, just beyond the valley, buried in the ruins of a long-dead colony. If he could get there, maybe, just maybe, he could buy time. Doran gritted his teeth. "Leora, there's an old outpost near Grid 29B. If I can reach it, I might be able to hold out until you arrive." "Understood. We're inbound. Just stay alive." No promises. Doran slammed the Titan into full throttle. Goliath-01 surged forward, ice fracturing beneath its colossal steps. The Reapers shrieked in fury, giving chase. The hunt was on. Frozen wasteland. Pursuit. The storm howled as Goliath-01 charged through the valley, massive strides carving deep trenches into the frozen terrain. The Reapers moved like specters, leaping across jagged cliffs, crawling along sheer ice walls with unnatural speed. They were gaining on him. Doran pushed the Titan harder, his vision blurring from the G-force. Warnings flashed across the screen. Joints overheating. Reactor core struggling. He didn't care. He just had to reach the outpost. Then, his sensors blared a new alarm. Something was moving underground. Doran barely had time to process the warning before the ice beneath him exploded. A colossal reaper, twice the size of the others, erupted from below, its segmented body writhing as razor-edged mandibles snapped toward the Titan's legs. Doran cursed and jumped. It wasn't graceful, but Goliath-01 barely cleared the attack, thrusters sputtering as the Titan landed hard on the opposite ridge. The massive reaper let out a screech, its glowing maw dripping with corrosive acid. It had been lying in wait, an ambush predator, perfectly adapted to Titan hunting. Doran had nowhere left to run. "All right," he muttered, rolling his shoulders. "Let's do this the hard way." Aboard the Resistance flagship, Hyperspace Transit, Captain Leora Kane gripped the edge of her console, watching the battle unfold through grainy surveillance feeds. The Titan was fast, but it was still outnumbered. "Damn it. ETA to Svalbard," she demanded. Her helmsman, a wiry man named Jace, shook his head. "We're pushing the engines to max burn, but we're still 5 minutes out." Leora clenched her fists. She had heard the stories. The Titans were supposed to be extinct. The last war machines of humanity's golden age, buried beneath the ruins of a shattered empire. And yet, one still lived. And if she had anything to say about it, it wasn't going to die today. "Jace," she said, "open all channels. I want every Resistance ship listening." A second later, comms across the fleet came to life. "This is Captain Kane. We're about to drop into hell to rescue what may be the last Terran Titan in existence. That thing down there. It's not just a machine. It's proof that we're not done. And I'll be damned if we let it fall." Her crew responded with a chorus of roars. Leora turned to the viewport, the streaks of hyperspace beginning to shift. "Prepare for combat drop." The fleet surged forward. The battle for the last Titan had begun. The massive Reaper coiled, its elongated frame shifting like a snake preparing to strike. Its 6 glowing eyes locked onto Goliath-01, a low, pulsating hum emanating from its grotesque form. Doran didn't wait. He brought the Titan's fist down in a brutal overhead smash. The impact shattered ice, sending cracks splintering outward like a spiderweb. The Reaper dodged, its unnatural speed allowing it to slither out of the way, leaving nothing but broken terrain where it had stood. It lunged forward, talons extended. Doran twisted Goliath-01 at the last second, slamming his left arm shield into the creature's skull. The force sent the Reaper reeling, its screeching cry echoing through the frozen valley. But before he could follow up, the other 2 Reapers arrived. They descended from the cliffs in a blur of motion, one raking its claws across Goliath-01's back, tearing away chunks of armor plating. The second latched onto the Titan's leg, its serrated teeth sinking into reinforced plating. Warning lights flared across Doran's cockpit. "Come on, hold together," he growled, pushing the Titan's servos to their limit. Goliath-01 lashed out with a powerful kick, sending the leg-clamped Reaper skidding across the ice. The other, still clinging to its back, began carving its way toward the reactor core. Doran knew he had seconds before they breached something vital. He needed a game-changer. Aboard the Resistance fleet, just outside Svalbard-9's orbit, the Terran Resistance fleet burst from hyperspace, warships emerging like avenging wraiths over the icy world. Captain Leora Kane stood at the bridge of the TS Dauntless, her jaw clenched as tactical readouts flooded her screen. Below them, Svalbard-9 was a war zone. Enemy signatures flooded the planet's surface. Hundreds of cell-carry warriors, Reapers, and, at the heart of it all, the Titan. Jace, her helmsman, exhaled sharply. "Dan, the pilot's still alive." Leora's grip tightened on the console. "Then let's make sure he stays that way." She turned to her weapons officer. Target the Reapers first. Orbital strike. Now. Ground battle. Salvation from the sky. Doran's displays flooded with warnings, Goliath-01 barely holding together, when suddenly, the sky burned white. A massive orbital blast struck the ground mere meters from his position. A shockwave of fire and kinetic force vaporized one of the Reapers instantly. Its shriek cut short as it was reduced to molten slag. The second Reaper leaping toward Goliath-01 was caught midair, its body torn apart by the impact before it even hit the ground. Doran barely had time to process what had happened. Then his comms crackled. "Titan pilot, you still breathing?" Doran let out a breathless chuckle, shaking the sweat from his brow. "Barely." "Good. Now let's clean this up." He turned his gaze upward, and for the first time in centuries, Terran warships streaked across the sky. Selkari flagship. The enemy watches. Vereshko watched the unfolding battle with narrowed eyes. The resistance had arrived. His mandibles clicked in frustration. He had underestimated humanity's resilience, a mistake he would not make again. Zurich, his second in command, shifted nervously. "Orders, my lord." Varish's voice was cold. "Launch the Legion." Zurich hesitated. "The Legion, but they err." "Do it," Varish hissed. "The Titan is no longer a relic. It is a beacon. If we let it survive, humanity will rise again." Zurich obeyed. Moments later, the Selkari's deadliest warforms, the Legion-class biodreadnoughts, began descending toward the battlefield. The real war had just begun. The sky above Svalornine split apart, unnatural shadows blotting out the dim sun. Legion-class warforms descended, each a nightmarish fusion of organic horror and advanced Selkari technology. Their monstrous, chitinous frames gleamed in the cold light, limbs ending in weapons that pulsed with energy far beyond conventional weaponry. Doran didn't need a tactical readout to know what they were. "Trouble. Leora, tell me you've got something for this." The comms crackled with tension. "We weren't expecting those things. The Selkari don't field the Legion lightly. If they're here," she hesitated, "they mean to erase you from history." Doran smirked bitterly. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried. The Legion warforms hit the ground hard, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. 3 of them, each the size of a battleship, their biosteel armor interwoven with Selkari hive mind intelligence. Then they activated. One let out a piercing screech, and immediately, the battlefield shifted. Selkari warriors stopped their individual attacks, moving as one. Coordinated, relentless, perfect. The Legion wasn't just fighting. It was directing the war itself. Doran's stomach tightened. This just got worse. Aboard the Resistance flagship, dauntless counterattack. Leora Kane didn't hesitate. New priority targets. All ships, fire on the Legion. The dauntless forward batteries roared, beams of plasma and mass driver rounds streaking toward the descending monstrosities. The fleet followed suit, unleashing a storm of firepower onto the battlefield. But the Legion adapted instantly. One raised its elongated limb, a series of hexagonal energy barriers forming in an instant, deflecting the barrage like raindrops against a shield. Another projected an electromagnetic wave, disrupting half the fleet's targeting systems in one sweep. Leora slammed a fist against the console. "They're countering everything." Jace, her helmsman, gritted his teeth. "These things are playing 4-dimensional chess while we're stuck in a brawl." Lyra's mind raced. The Titan was their only chance. "Doran," she barked into comms, "we need you to take those things down. Our weapons aren't cutting it." Doran's laugh was humorless. "Oh sure, I'll just punch a warform the size of a dreadnought. No problem." "Not alone, you won't." Leora turned to her weapons officer. "Prepare orbital lance. Targeting uplink, feeding it directly to the Titan." Doran's comms blared with new telemetry data. His HUD flooded with energy readouts, marking a single point of vulnerability on the nearest Legion warform. Lyra's voice was firm. Hit that target, and we'll finish the job. Doran cracked his knuckles. Now we're talking. Ground battle. Titan versus Legion. The nearest Legion-class warform turned, sensing the threat. Its arms split apart, revealing pulse cannons capable of vaporizing cities. Doran charged. Goliath-01's servos roared, ice fracturing beneath its colossal weight. The Titan was faster than it had any right to be, closing the distance in seconds. The Legion fired. A blast of violet energy tore through the air, missing Goliath-01 by inches as Doran skidded into a low slide, the Titan's bulk moving with almost unnatural agility. The heat seared past him, vaporizing ice in 100-meter radius. No time to think. Doran launched upward, thrusters maxed out, the Titan leaping toward the Legion's exposed weak point. The Legion reacted too late. Goliath-01's fist smashed into its core, the reinforced plating cracking like glass. The warform let out an ear-piercing shriek, its body spasming as it tried to repair the damage. It wouldn't get the chance. Lyra. Now. From orbit, a beam of pure destruction lanced downward. The orbital lance struck true, the pinpoint strike piercing through the Legion's body like a spear through flesh. The creature convulsed, its limbs twitching in disbelief. Then, with a final, broken shriek, it collapsed. One down. Doran barely had time to breathe before the other two Legion warforms turned their focus on him. Cell Carry Command. Varish's Fury. Varish K stood in seething silence aboard his flagship. One of his Legion-class warforms was dead. Unacceptable. These humans, he muttered, voice cold. They fight like cornered beasts. But even beasts bleed. He turned to his weapons officer. Activate the rift engine. Bring the Abyssal Hunter into play. Zirek visibly hesitated. But my lord, that thing will destroy everything. Varish's mandibles curled into something resembling a grin. Exactly. The final hour approaches. Doran barely had time to prepare before his sensors went insane. Something was coming. Something massive. The ice beneath his feet began to crack, as if something below was stirring. Something bigger than anything they'd faced before. Lyra's voice was frantic over comms. Doran, we've got a problem. The cell carry just activated something called the Abyssal Hunter. Doran's grip tightened on the controls. And I'm guessing that's bad. It's worse than bad. On the horizon, the ground split apart. And then, from the depths of Svalornine, a creature beyond nightmares emerged. A titanic horror, larger than even the Legion, a fusion of abyssal monstrosity and cell-carry war tech, its very presence warping reality around it. Doran stared. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. The Abyssal Hunter had awakened. The final battle was about to begin. The Abyssal Hunter tore free from the ice, an unholy fusion of bioorganic monstrosity and cell-carry war tech. Massive spines lined its serpentine body, and its multiple limbs, each ending in claw-like appendages, radiated energy strong enough to make Goliath-01's sensors glitch. Doran had faced horrors before, but this was different. This thing wasn't just a warform. It was designed to hunt titans. Orbit, the Resistance's desperate strategy. Leora Kane stared at the readings in horror. The Abyssal Hunter wasn't just enormous. It was warping the planet's gravity field around it. Space itself was distorting, making targeting solutions nearly impossible. We have to pull back, Jace said, his voice tight with fear. That thing, it's beyond anything we faced. Leora clenched her fists. If we pull back now, Doran dies, and the Titan dies with him. Silence. They had come too far to back down. She turned to her tactical officer. Give me everything we've got left. Ground battle. The Titan versus the Hunter. The Abyssal Hunter struck first. It lashed out with a tendril, faster than something that size had any right to be. Goliath-01 barely dodged, rolling across the shattered ice as the tendril impacted the ground, creating a crater hundreds of meters wide. Doran's HUD was blaring red, energy output off the charts, armor integrity weakening. Warning: enemy structure unknown. Yeah, no kidding, Doran muttered, wrenching Goliath-01 to its feet. He had to test its defenses. He fired his plasma cannons, twin lances of white-hot energy striking the hunter's carapace. The result was instantaneous. The creature's flesh rippled, absorbing the energy. Then it redirected the blast, firing the same plasma energy back at Goliath-01. Doran barely managed to deploy his shields, the blast slamming into him with enough force to send him skidding backward. His chest tightened. The abyssal hunter could absorb and return energy-based attacks, which meant it could counter everything the fleet had. This just keeps getting better, he muttered. A new plan. The Titan's last gamble. Doran's mind raced. He couldn't outgun it. He couldn't outlast it. But maybe he could outthink it. He opened comms. Lyora, I need an energy projection on that thing. What's its weakest point? Her voice came back tense. There isn't one. But wait. She hesitated, scanning through the data. It has a core, deep inside. We're talking under layers of armor and regenerative tissue. You'd have to tear it open manually. Doran grinned. Then that's what I'll do. He shifted Goliath-01 into full melee mode. The Titan's right arm transformed, its fist retracting into a hyper-dense gravity hammer, built for breaching planetary defenses. Doran charged. The abyssal hunter recoiled, sensing the shift. It lashed out with 3 tendrils at once. Doran dodged the first, parried the second. The third wrapped around Goliath-01's torso, lifting the Titan into the air. Alarms shrieked. Doran didn't panic. He redirected all power to his thrusters, pushing them beyond safe limits. The Titan ignited. With a burst of kinetic force, he launched himself forward, tearing free from the tendril's grip. The abyssal hunter lurched back, momentarily stunned. Doran seized the opening. He brought the gravity hammer down with all his might. The impact was cataclysmic. A shockwave rippled outward, shattering ice, cracking through the hunter's armor. The creature screamed, its body convulsing as its outer defenses finally buckled. And beneath that armor, the core pulsed. Vulnerable. The final strike. A hero's reckoning. Lyora's voice crackled in his ear. Doran, the core's exposed. You need to finish it. Doran's breathing was ragged. Goliath-01 was falling apart. Systems failing. Armor failing. But it didn't matter. Because he was so damn close. He shifted all remaining power to the Titan's core, overloading every system. His HUD flashed a final warning. Warning. Core meltdown imminent. Doran smiled grimly. Let's make it count. He threw everything forward, Goliath-01's entire body becoming a weapon. The abyssal hunter tried to retreat, but it was too slow. Doran plunged the Titan's arm deep into the creature's core, cracking it open like a dying star. And then, with one last, defiant roar, the abyssal hunter detonated. A wave of energy erupted outward, consuming the battlefield in a blinding light. Lyora watched in silence from orbit as the massive explosion engulfed both the Titan and the hunter. The ground shook, the sky burned. And then, there was only silence. Aftermath. A Titan's fate unknown. The fleet held its breath. The comms were dead. Then, static. And a voice, weak but alive. That the best you got? Lyora laughed in sheer relief. Doran, you crazy bastard, she whispered. You did it. As the dust cleared, Goliath-01 stood battered, broken, but victorious. The Xelkari fleet began to retreat. Because for the first time in centuries, humanity had won. The battlefield was silent. The abyssal hunter's remains smoldered across the icy wasteland, its shattered core still leaking energy into the frozen ground. Blackened organic husks and twisted, cell-carry war tech littered the land. What was once an impenetrable cell-carry stronghold was now a graveyard. And at the center of it all, Goliath-01 stood motionless. Inside the Titan's cockpit, Doran barely clung to consciousness. His HUD was a mess of warnings. Power reserves, 3%. Neural uplink strain critical. Structural integrity failing. He groaned, his body aching from the sheer force of the final blow. He had won, but his Titan, his lifeline, was in critical condition. A familiar voice crackled through the static. "Doran, come in. Damn it, say something." "Leora." He smirked weakly. "I'm still here, Kane. You can stop screaming." A relieved exhale came through the comms. "You're a stubborn bastard, you know that. Wouldn't have it any other way." He tried to move Goliath-01, but the servos barely responded. The Titan wasn't going anywhere. Then his radar pinged. Multiple signatures. Doran's stomach twisted. Not friendly. Cell-carry reinforcements. The final threat. On the horizon, a cell-carry war fleet emerged from the storm clouds. They weren't retreating. They were returning in force. Lyora's voice was sharp. "New enemy fleet inbound. Looks like Varish isn't taking this loss lightly." Doran cursed. "He's throwing everything he's got at us." Jace's voice cut in from the Dauntless. "We can't hold another wave, Commander. The fleet's running on fumes. If they hit us now, we're done." Leora knew it too. The Resistance had poured everything into this battle. There was nothing left to fight with. Doran's gaze drifted to the wreckage of the Abyssal Hunter. Maybe there was one last card to play. "Kane, I need an emergency uplink to Goliath-01. Her voice hardened. "Doran, whatever you're thinking. No time to argue. Just do it." A pause. Then, through gritted teeth, "Linking now." His cockpit flooded with new data. The Titan's last stand. Doran hacked into the remains of the Abyssal Hunter. Its core was destroyed, but its power grid was still smoldering with unstable energy. Enough energy to turn this entire battlefield into a death trap. A wicked grin formed on Doran's face. Time to give Varish a parting gift. He forced Goliath-01 to its feet, servos groaning under the strain. The Titan shouldn't have been able to move, but it did. He redirected the last dregs of its power into a single, desperate action. Lyora's voice was panicked. "Doran, what the hell are you doing?" "Making sure they never come back." He punched into the remains of the Hunter's core. A chain reaction ignited. The ground beneath Goliath-01 shook violently, ice fissuring apart as the last remnants of the Abyssal Hunter's energy began to spiral out of control. Doran forced Goliath-01 into a final stance, aiming its weapons at the incoming cell-carry fleet. And then, he sent one last transmission. Aboard that cell-carry flagship, Varish's realization. Varish Co. watched the battlefield with seething fury. The Legion had failed. The Abyssal Hunter had failed. And now, the Titan still stood. That human, Doran, was still fighting. Then his sensors blared a warning. The Abyssal Hunter's remains were destabilizing, and the Titan was standing right in the center of it. Varish's mandibles clicked in realization. The human was going to trigger a planetary-scale detonation. Varish snarled. "All forces, retreat. Now." But it was too late. The reckoning. Doran's hand hovered over the final command. This was it. "See you on the other side," he muttered. Then he activated the overload. The battlefield erupted in blinding white light. A planet-shaking explosion consumed the entire area, a shockwave ripping through the frozen wasteland with a force that tore apart the cell-carry reinforcements. The sky burned as Varish's fleet scattered. Many ships vaporized instantly. The remaining resistance ships barely managed to pull back as the explosion ripped apart that cell-carry foothold on Svalbard. The entire battlefield was erased in fire and ice, and when the light finally faded, Goliath-01 was gone. Aftermath. The legend lives on. Aboard the Dauntless, the crew watched in stunned silence. Lyora's hands trembled on the controls. Doran. Static filled the comms. Then, nothing. For the first time, Doran's voice didn't come through. The fleet drifted in silence. Had he really gone? Jace swallowed. Did he just? Lyora closed her eyes. She had no answer. But as the remaining cell-carry ships flooded into the void, one thing was certain. The last Titan had won, and Doran's name would never be forgotten. The battlefield was gone. What was once a frozen wasteland littered with cell-carry war machines and the towering remains of the abyssal hunter was now a crater of scorched ice and twisted metal. The explosion had vaporized everything at its epicenter, leaving behind a blackened scar on Svalbard. Goliath-01 was nowhere to be seen, and neither was Doran Vallis. Aboard the Dauntless, a hollow victory. Lyora Kane stood at the bridge of the Dauntless, staring at the destruction. The cell-carry fleet was in full retreat, their forces shattered beyond recovery. The warfront on Svalbard was broken. Humanity had won. But it didn't feel like a victory. Not without him. Commander, Jace's voice was quiet. The Titan's signal. It's gone. Lyora gritted her teeth. No, not like this. Keep scanning, she ordered. I don't care if we have to sweep the entire planet. Jace hesitated. Lyora, keep scanning. Her hands clenched into fists. Doran had defied death before. She refused to believe this was how it ended. Deep beneath the ice, a faint heartbeat. Buried beneath tons of frozen rubble and wreckage, a single flickering signal pulsed in the dark. It was weak. Barely there. Inside the remains of Goliath-01, emergency systems struggled to stay active. The Titan's once mighty form was now a crushed, broken shell, half buried in ice and debris. Within the cockpit, Doran's breath was shallow. The neural link had pushed his mind to its absolute limits. His body ached like fire, his vision blurred from exhaustion and oxygen deprivation. But he was still alive. He exhaled a weak chuckle. That all you got? The Titan's cockpit flickered with dying power. Life support was failing. Doran knew he had minutes left. Guess this is it, he muttered to himself. Not a bad way to go. He'd gone down swinging, taken out an entire cell-carry fleet, and saved the Resistance. If he had to die, this was a damn good way to do it. He closed his eyes. Then, a ping. His eyes snapped open. His HUD, dim and glitching, suddenly flashed with a new signal. An incoming transmission. Then a familiar voice, full of anger and relief. Doran, you stubborn bastard. If you're still breathing, you better answer me right now. Lyora. Doran grinned weakly. Yelling already, huh? I'm barely conscious here. A sharp exhale came through the comms. Hold on. We're coming to get you. Doran sagged back into his seat, exhaustion overtaking him. About damn time. Rescue. The last Titan rises again. It took hours of careful excavation, but the Resistance crew finally uncovered Goliath-01's remains. The Titan's armor was ruined, its systems fried beyond repair. But deep within the wreckage, they found him. When the rescue team pulled Doran from the cockpit, cheers erupted. He was battered, bruised, and barely able to stand, but alive. Lyora met him at the landing bay, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. You really don't know when to quit, do you? She said. Doran grinned. If I did, we wouldn't be standing here. She sighed, then, before he could react, grabbed him in a tight embrace. Don't ever pull that stunt again, she muttered. He chuckled. No promises. A war won, but not over. News of the battle spread like wildfire. The destruction of the abyssal hunter. The retreat of the Excelsior. The survival of humanity's last titan. For the first time in years, hope burned brighter than ever. But the war wasn't over. The Excelsior weren't defeated, only wounded. Their empire still loomed over the galaxy, still commanded entire armadas. And they would return. Leora stood with Doran on the observation deck, staring out at the war-torn stars. "We made history today," she said. Doran nodded. "Yeah, but it's not enough." She turned to him. "What do you mean?" He exhaled, watching the stars burn. "They're gonna come back. Bigger, stronger. We can't just fight them off. We have to end them." Leora studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Then we finish what we started." Doran smiled, rolling his shoulders. "Guess that means I need a new titan." She smirked. "I might have some ideas." And as the Resistance fleet prepared for the next fight, one thing was clear. The last titan was far from done. Humanity wasn't just surviving anymore. They were taking the fight to the enemy. And this time, they weren't holding back.